So, yeah, we're super happy to have Shuang Li present today. Shuang is a PhD candidate at MIT, advised by Antonio Torralba. She's interested in developing AI systems that generalize to a wide range of novel tasks and continually learn from the environment. Her research explores methods to incorporate compositionality into deep learning models, giving rise to stronger generalization abilities for solving more challenging novel tasks. And her research involves broadly in the spaces of generative modeling, embodied AI, and vision language understanding. She is the recipient of many fellowships. So that includes Meta, Adobe, the MIT Cenef Zui CS Fellowship, ECS Rising Star, and so on. So we're very honored to have you speak with us today, and we're very excited to hear your talk.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the introduction, and thanks everyone for coming to my talk. So today I'm going to introduce my work enabling compositional generalization of AI systems. So recent works on large deep learning models have shown amazing results in different domains, such as text generation, image generation, and video generation. So one aspect that makes this model so powerful is their ability to recombine different concepts to create new things. For example, given a new text input, a cup of cat, and the text-to-image generation model can generate an image has both objects. So, but if you play with one of these models, you will quickly realize that this compositionality is not consistent. Let's try a new text input, a red house and a blue car. And you can see the state-of-the-art text-to-image generation model completely missed the blue car, and it's messed up the object colors. And this is not just a single case. If you run this model multiple times, you'll find lots of generated results are not correct. So these models are trained on lots of data. Why do they fail at compositionality? Do they really understand each separate concept? And to test this, we give each single concept to the models. And we can find this model can generate the correct results. This means the models understand each separate concept, but they are not good at composing this concept together. So if you look at these deep learning models, and most of them follow this pipeline, there are lots of data collected from the real world, and people build data set with many human labels, and then they train the deep neural networks on the collected data. But it can be very challenging to get data with all the combinations. So this is not just because there are endless object categories, things, and events in the world, but also because the combinations of all these things can be infinite. There are also many uncommon combinations in the world, such as a blue apple and put apple inside dishwasher. So it's impossible to incorporate all the combinations at once. And models purely trained on lots of data are very likely to fail at compositionality. So they are not data efficient, not robust, not controllable, and not explainable. And it's hard to know what type of compositions work and what doesn't work. So, but compositionality is a very common and very important thing in our daily life. For example, we have many things, and the things are composed of different objects. And we also use language, and sentences are composed of different words. Events can also be described by a sequence of actions. And we also want to build AI systems to help the compositionality, which is very important for them to recognize new objects, create new things, or solve new tasks. For example, in the self-driving system, the model is well trained to detect objects in different situations, but it can be very hard to get lots of data with a combination of all these situations. An AI system with the compositionality can generalize to such compositions, can make the AI system more data efficient and safer. Also, there can be some new conditions that are never seen in previous data. And compositionality can help the model to combine the new skills with previous skills and adapt them faster and better to the complicated environments. So we are interested in incorporating the compositionality into deep neural networks. And we aim to solve tasks with new combinations that are outside the training distribution. For example, during training, the model has seen different concepts, like the different images and different language descriptions. And during testing, we ask the model to solve more complex tasks with the new combinations of these different separate concepts. And we are also very interested in composing models together. So there are lots of, pre-trained models available, like vision model, language model, decision-making models. And we want to use these models to solve more challenging tasks without additional training, without using lots of data. So in this talk, I will introduce how we achieve compositionality and how we overcome the problems of previous methods. So I will first introduce a unified framework for composing concepts and goals, and then I will introduce how we compose different pre-trained models from different domains and build a more powerful multimodal framework that can solve a wide range of tasks. Return to our previous example, a red house and a blue car, and the model trained on lots of data, but their compositionality is not consistent. So one reason is that these models didn't use any compositional prayer or compositional knowledge, and they try to memorize the broad pattern over lots of data, and this is very data inefficient. So there are also some previous work they achieve compositionality by designing specific models for specific tasks, and they also require lots of human annotations of different components. So can we propose a general framework for compositionality that can be used for different tasks, and how to incorporate the compositionality into deep neural networks in a data efficient way? So for example, using logic operators and, or, and not to compose different concepts. So let's take the image generation as an example. We can compose different concepts using the compositional operators and to generate these images. But it's not very easy to achieve the compositionality. For example, it's not clear how to define these compositional operators and what model to use and how to apply this compositional operator to deep neural networks. So here we found that probability is a fundamental problem in many machine learning topics. And we're thinking whether we can define the compositionality in the probability domain. And we can explicitly define the compositional operators using the probability. And for example, we have a data set of images, and each image is a data point X. And the data distribution can be represented as this probability Px. And we want to model the data probability and build the compositional operators on top of it. So we found the energy-based model can be used to model the data probability. And here is a definition of energy-based model. It represents data by learning an unnormalized probability distribution. And the X is a data point. And the E is the energy function, which is learned by a deep neural network. So we model the data probability by learning the deep neural network. And the key idea is to iteratively update the generated image X using the gradient of the energy function. And this process is called non-driven sampling. So X can be started from a noise image, and you iteratively update the image until you can get the image looks like a real image. And if you want to generate some images conditioned on certain concepts, we can simply use this conditional energy function to estimate the conditional probability. Okay, now let's say we assume we have an energy function that can model the data probability, and now we want to compose different concepts together. So here we define these compositional operators. The first one is conjunction, and the key idea is to if you have different concepts, for example, smiling and wave hair, and we want to generate images that contain both concepts. And to do this, we can define this composed energy function, as the addition of each two separate energy functions. So this can be rewritten in the probability domain, but if you look at this equation, the composed version is just simply the addition of two separate versions. And this means you can just train your model condition on each separate concept. And during inference, you can compose this concept using this compositional operator, even though the model is now trained on such composed data. And here is an example of disjunction. For example, we want to generate images that contain at least one of the concepts. And here, if you rewrite the equation in the probability domain, and we can get this log sum exp of these two separate energy functions. And the last one is a negation operator. We want to generate some images that do not contain certain concept. And here we can just define this not operator by subtract the energy function of the concept that we don't want. And if you an intuitive understanding is that we try to minimize the probability of this concept, and it can be rewritten as this function. So now during inference, let's say we start from a random noise image, and we have a well-trained energy function that conditioned on certain different concepts. And if we send the energy function and the label and the current image to the energy function, we can get a conditional energy score. And if you send a different label, you'll get a new energy score. And we can just compose these energy scores together using the proposed compositional operator and, not, and or. And then we use the long-run sampling. I just mentioned like the gradient of the composed energy function to update the generated image. And we do this multiple times, and every time we can get a better result. And until we can generate the image that looks like real images. So this is just for inference. We do the compositionality during the inference time. But to train such energy functions, we might need to let the model know what the generated images look like and what the real images look like. And for the generated image, we can just use a not optimal energy function to generate some images. And then we send them with the real image to the same energy function. And also we can condition on some labels, and we can get a negative energy score and positive energy score. And to train the energy function, we use this contrastive divergence loss. It tries to push the energy of the generated image to be higher and the energy of the real image to be lower. And we get a better energy function, and then we use the energy function to generate more image. So we iteratively train this energy function and generate more images. So this is how we train the model. But during training, it's only conditional on single concept. But during inference, we can do lots of combinations of these different concepts. So compared with previous method, you can see they trained on lots of data, and it's not data efficient, not robust, not controllable, and cannot be expanded. But if you use our compositional operators, first, you don't need to train the model on all the combinations, and it's much more data efficient. And it's also have a very clear definition of different composition. So it's more robust, more controllable, and more expandable. And also because we define the energy function, the compositional operators in the probability domain. So this is a very general framework that can be used to solve different tasks. And I will show you different results of this proposed method. So here is the result of composing facial attributes. And these are the images generated conditioning on the smiling and male concept. And we can compose the smiling and male, smiling and not male. And here are more complex combinations, smiling and female or not smiling and male. And we can also use the composition operators to compose object attributes, here are the images generated conditional on the position concept. And we can compose the position and the rotation. And now you can see all the images, all the objects are facing to the same direction. And here's the result of composing position and rotation and type. So there are more results of composing relational descriptions. And the DALL-E 2 is one of the state-of-the-art text-to-image generation model. But if you give like a very long sentence description to DALL-E 2, most of the time it needs some object described in the sentence description. But if you look at our method, which we use a composition operator to connect different concepts, and it can generate the correct image that has all the object relations described in the input sentence. And here are more examples. We can generate images that are outside the training distribution. For example, the two balls are standing together. It doesn't really follow the physical law, and we don't have such images in the training data set. But if you give such conditions in your language description, it can also give you the corresponding images. And there is another example of composing more object relational descriptions. Again, during training, it's only conditional a single concept, but during inference, we can compose lots of more concepts. So we also have some numbers, like we compare the proposed method with some baselines, because there are not many methods that can be directly used to do the composable image generation. So we modify some baselines, and here's the result of our method and baseline for generating images conditional on a single component. And here are composing 2 components and 3 components. And our method is much better than this baselines. Okay, so this is about composable energy-based models. So in recent works, diffusion models have achieved amazing results. And in our ECCV paper, we found that diffusion model can be interpreted as energy-based models, and the proposed compositional operator can be directly applied to diffusion models. So here is a illustration of the diffusion model. You generate the image and remove the noise gradually. And this is the equation they use to generate the images. Again, every time you reduce some noise from the original generated image, and if you do this iteratively, you can get a clean image. And if you compare with the diffusion model and energy-based model, you can see they are very similar. And the difference here is that they learn this noise term epsilon, which is also the the gradient of the log of the probability, and which is exactly the same like an energy-based model. It try to optimize the learning the probability, and if you take the gradient, they give you the same equations. So now we can actually use the compositional operators on diffusion models. So let's say we have a set of independent concepts. It can be like a different language descriptions or objects positions. And now we want to estimate the joint probability distribution. And it can be rewritten as this equation. This is just a very simple base rule. So we can rewrite it as this. And then we can further rewrite the equation as this. But I will skip the intermediate equations. And let's see what this equation is doing. So in this equation, there's a first term, like an epsilon. And you can think it as an unconditional term. Like you want to generate some image, as long as it looks real, it's okay. And then there are also a conditional term, like you want to generate some image conditional on CI, for example. And now we want to push the model to, to a certain direction, so that the model is more likely to generate images conditional on that concept. And this term is just the direction vector. It tells you the direction of that certain concept. And here, if you have more different concepts, you can get more and more such direction vectors. And now we want to generate images containing all this concept. And you can just simply add all of them together using the summation here. And this is very similar to what we did in energy function. If you want to have a composed energy function, you can simply add the energy, separate energy function together as well. So I will skip the disjunction part, other operators. I'll only show some results of the diffusion model. So we compare with some state-of-the-art image generation models. This is the glide model. It takes the long sentence as input, but you can see it's actually messed up the object attributes. It's supposed to be yellow trees, but now it's generate image with yellow road. And our method can give you the correct image. And there are more such examples, like a starry night sky and a polar bear in the forest. The original model just missed the polar bear, and our method can generate all the components. So we can also compose different objects. And during training, we have objects, at most 5 objects in the image. But during inference, we can compose more objects, like 7 objects that are never seen during training. And this is a much more challenge than, generate images like, inside the training distribution. So because our compositional operator is defined in the probability domain, and there's no training, so we can just apply them to the existing diffusion models. So this is the stable diffusion model, and we use our compositional operator to compose these diffusion models. And for example, in the third image, a mystery tree and a magic pond and not dark, it will give you a colorful image. And if you say and dark, and the image is a dark image now. So let's back to the example. Just use stable diffusion. It can now generate the correct image. But now if you use our compositional operators, and it can give you the correct image. Okay, and as mentioned in the beginning, we define the compositional operator in the probability domain. So it can be used for other tasks as well. And here are some examples for 3D asset generation, like a chair and a green avocado, a chair and not chaired X. And we can also use the composition operator to do robot control tasks. For example, the height of the red block is higher than the height of the purple block, and the height of the blue block is higher than the height of the red block. So there are more examples of different tasks. And we can also do the art generation. It can give you the image that satisfies the given text prompt. Okay. So this is about composing concepts and goals. And the concepts and goals are usually from the same modality, like language or visual attributes. But we also want to achieve compositionality, by composing models from different modalities. So there are many portrait models, that are available. For example, vision, language, and decision-making models. So these models have distinct and complementary capabilities. So can we compose them to build a more powerful multimodal framework? For example, if you have vision model and language model, can you use it to solve like video tasks without using any video data? So there are some previous works, they try to compose different models. One type of work is like using jointly fine-tuning. They have some portrait vision model and language model, and they also collect lots of paired data to train the model on top of the data. And the other works, they have some common interface, like a language model, to build the connection of different models. But if you look at this model first, they don't have any closed loop feedback. And if the model makes mistakes, it cannot be corrected by the other models. And also the training, fine-tuning requires a lot of data. And sometimes, the common interface, like a language model, are limited to particular type of data. They cannot be used to describe the continuous control. They cannot be used to describe the maze. So our method is a little bit different. So we also use the portrait models, and we use some of them as a generator, some of them as scholars. And then we use this iterative consensus optimization to build a closed loop between these different models and to do different tasks. So here is an example of the iterative consensus. For example, we have some portrait models as a generator, and the generator will generate some proposals. And now we also have different portrait models which can be used as scholars. For example, clip model. It takes the text and image as input and can give you a score whether they are matched or not. And some other like scorers like classifier, it can also give you some scores to evaluate the input. And now we can use the scholars to evaluate the generated proposals and then use the evaluation result to update the generator to generate better proposals. And we repeat this process until the generated proposals is good for all different scholar models. So here's an example of image generation. Let's say we want to generate image condition on the text input, and we use a diffusion model. It can give you some initial results condition on the text input, but maybe this is not good enough. So we can use a clip score to evaluate the generated image, whether it's matched the given text or not. And we can also have other scorer models like classifier, and we just compose these scorers together. For example, add them up and compute the gradient of the image and use this gradient to update the generated image. And we repeat this process again. So compared with this previous method, you can see there's a closed loop feedback between different models. And also there's no training and no fine tuning. So this is also a unified framework that can be used for different tasks. And here I will show some examples of using this simple framework to solve different vision tasks and decision-making tasks. So here is a video question answering. And the generator is a language model, it's a GPT-2. And the scholar is a vision and language models. But we want to use this model to solve this video task. For example, what food is being made, and the model will give you the result of making pizza. And how to make the food step by step. And here are the results generated by our method. Then there's a more example of robot manipulation. So we want to control the robots that can manipulate the objects that have the same object relation as shown in this input image. And we can just compose the generators and scholars and to achieve this task. So I don't think I have enough time to talk about the details, but if you are interested about this part, we can talk more about this part later. So if you look at our energy-based model and diffusion models, we use this composition conjunction operator to compose different components. And here we can also compose different scholars. And you can see after we compose these scholars, it can achieve much better than just using a single scholar model. And also in our energy-based model and diffusion model, we use this iterative refinement. And here in this framework, the iterative refinement also very helpful. And you can see compared with the model without using iterative refinement, ours is much better. So the same idea can also be used to reconstruct 3D scenes. And in our new paper, we try to compose the features from different portrait models and to solve 3D tasks and achieve very good results in different tasks. For example, this is a self-driving. We want the model to find the target place, target position. And we can also use this model to segment 3D objects or 3D scenes. You just need to click the one point in the 3D space and it will segment out the object. And also here's an example of indoor navigation. We want to find the target object and the model will interact with objects in the environment until we find the target object. So we have talked about composing concepts and goals and composing models. And we found there are two very important factors to achieve good compositionality. One is the prior knowledge, one is a compositional structure. And for the prior knowledge, they are from the pre-trained models. So the better the pre-trained models are, the better the final composition results are. And the compositional structure is from the proposed compositional operators. So these two put together allows us to have robust and controllable compositionality. So I will talk a lot about building the compositional structures, but how to get the pre-trained models without good, with good compositionality. So I also have some works about training models to achieve compositionality, but today I will only briefly mention a very simple but very efficient method, transferring compositionality. And again, this is a general framework, can be used for different tasks. So the key idea is to transfer the compositionality in pre-trained language model to solve other tasks without using lots of data. And language model is one of the most commonly used model for studying compositionality. And people find many interesting compositional results obtained by the pre-trained language model. For example, these results are generated by GPT-3. But if you look at these models, they are trained on lots of text data. And in many other tasks, it can be very time consuming and very expensive to get so much data. For example, in decision-making tasks, here's an example of a decision-making task in virtual homes, and the agent is asked to finish some household activities. So at each time step, the agents need to take the goal, history, and observation as the input to predict the next action. So to transfer the compositionality in pre-trained language model to solve the decision-making task, we can simply, convert all the policy input into a sequence of inputs, such as a sequence of words. And the goal can be described by a natural language description, for example. And we can convert all this input to this sequence representations, and then we send them to the pre-trained model to predict action. So this is a very simple idea, but if you look at the result, like the red bar is the result generated by using the pre-trained language model. And to solve this task, the model needs to have the compositional generalization ability. So these tasks are never seen during training, and the model using the large pre-trained model is much better than other models. So again, compositionality is a very broad topic, and it has many applications. So I'm interested in incorporating the compositionality in deep learning neural networks. And I think both the powerful pre-trained models and the compositional structures are important for achieving good compositionality. So in my future work, I have talked a lot about compositionality on image generation and decision-making in embodied environment. So in my future work, I want to keep working on compositionality and further extend the compositionality to other areas. And there are also many interesting topics in generative modeling and embodied AI that I will keep working on. So for example, the generative modeling, I have shown the result of compositionality. But can we automatically discover the concept from data using the compositional or using the generative models? For example, can we decompose a thing into different objects? So we have some initial results of using the generative models to discover the visual concept from data without using any label. And here are some examples. For example, S1 is the discovered visual concept, and we can generate the image condition on this concept. And here are more results of discovered concepts. And we can compose this concept together to generate the more interesting results. So yeah, like a generative model is really powerful. It can be used to do the composition and decomposition, but it can also be used to learn good feature representations. And we think it's very useful to take use of the visual concept from this generative models to solve other vision tasks. For example, the classification, detection, and segmentation. And this is something that I will keep working on in my future work. So I also want to keep working on the compositionality on embodied AI, but further extend it to broader 3D embodied AI tasks. Again, it might be very easy to get the vision and language data, but it can be very challenging to collect those data, like decision-making data and 3D data from the real world. And there's no realistic embodied environment. So we built this VirtualCity, which is the largest 3D embodied environment for simulating human social activity and lots of decision-making tasks in the real world. So here are some examples in VirtualCity. We can control the agent to do different tasks, like sitting on the sofa and watching TV. And then we also have very realistic rendering physics in the environment. And these are outdoor environments, so the agent can do different outdoor activities. We also have this traffic system and the crowd system. And some examples of a supermarket and subway station. So yeah, there are lots of tasks we can do in this environment. So we mentioned that we transfer the compositionality to solve the compositional task in virtual home. But here, in this new environment, there might be more complicated tasks. For example, make salmon. And we might need more complex composition to solve such tasks, like hierarchical compositionality. So for example, making salmon, the agent need to several steps to finish. First, break the task into different subtasks and then solve each subtask. And each subtask also composed of many steps. So there are many interesting tasks in VirtualCity about compositionality we can explore. So I also want to mention that this is not just the build for compositionality. So this is a very general framework can be used for different tasks, like decision making. We have both a robot and multi-agent in the environment, and we can use it to design different decision-making tasks. And also there are lots of 3D objects and procedure generation. So it's very easy to get 3D data and video data from the environment. So building this realistic environment is a closer step towards, adapt the model trained on simulated data to real world. So finally, I want to mention that compositionality is a very broad concept and they can be used in different domains. So for example, the biology, and I'm working with people doing regulatory genomics to generate gene sequence. Let's say for example, in the human cells, the DNA are the same, but because of the gene expression are different. So the cells have different functions. And people in this area are interested in generate gene sequence that has compositionality. For example, it can express in certain cell types, but not in other cell types. And compositionality can also help models better learn on smaller data sets. So there might not enough medical data, and models with this compositionality is more data efficient and can help the doctor better understand the correlations between different diseases. So here, like a compositionality can also be used to predict the financial market. There are lots of models trained on the market data, but also some models trained on other data. And we can also compose these different models to make better prediction of future market. And here, like compositionality can help robotic system and self-driving system by composing the new knowledge, new skills with the previous skills. And the system can continually learn from the environment. So there are many applications for compositionality. And I think compositionality is a very important part of generalization. And this is something that I will keep exploring in my future work. So to summarize, I introduced like composing concepts and goals and composing models. And our compositionality is data efficient, robust, and controllable. There are also many interesting topics I want to keep explore in the future. So thank you very much. Do you have any questions? Yeah.
Shuang, we have some questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so amazing talk. Thank you very much. It's very interesting, very inspiring. So my impression from some of the parts here is that like compositionality might be a little bit of an overloaded word. And I want to refer to like the composing concepts and goals, like sort of the with the generation of images there. So could you quickly go back to like slides around 30 or something if you don't mind? Yeah, well, okay. Yeah, so this is perfect, right? And then you have this result. So my impression here is when you compose concepts together, the model, like whichever model you're using in this case is score-based, like as soon as the concepts are present, even as separate objects in the scene, sort of the energy condition on like these different prompts will be positive, right? So you'll have an object that represents one concept and then another object, and they're sort of spatially composed into the scene, is my impression. But then on slide 38, you showed like this really cool result. No, I got the slide number wrong. Maybe it's 37. Yeah, okay, so the middle one, this is not a spatial composition anymore, it's a conceptual composition, right? So the concept monitor and brown couch, it's not being generated as like two concepts being present independently somewhere at some position in the scene, which is spatial composition. But here we have like a true conceptual fusion, which I think is really interesting. So what are your thoughts on how the model, like, are we able to control or distinguish between the spatial arrangement, like putting multiple objects in the scene, and like one of them is going to match with a certain prompt, and then you're conjoining them with the AND operator? But in this middle one is just very interesting because like a monitor and a ground count at the same time, and they're not like two separate things or something. So how does this work? Do you think this is something that can be controlled, like combining concepts like in a semantic level and not just in a spatial level or something?
Yeah, I think this is a really great question. I think that, as I mentioned in one of the slides, compositionality has two important factors in my work. One is the pre-trained model, one is the compositional operators. So the more powerful the pre-trained models are, then the better the final compositional results are. And here, if you look at this 3D result, so this 3D pre-trained model is not that powerful. Usually all the objects appear in the middle of the image or in the middle of the thing. And that's why when you compose different concepts and the objects also merge together as a single object, which is appear in the middle of the thing. But if you look at these 2D models, stable diffusion, they are much more powerful than this pre-trained 3D model. So the objects can appear in different locations in the image. And in this case, when you compose this, it can show like the spatial compositions in this case. And I also think we can control the spatial compositionality. For example, when you train the models, you can add some spatial information like a blue car in the left, a red house in the top, something like that. So this allows you to compose this, like add this spatial information when you compose them.
Do you think it would be possible to have two separate AND operators? One of them would be like spatial AND and the other one would be conceptual AND. Because I can imagine, in this case, red house and blue car, it doesn't really make sense to combine them because red and blue are incompatible. But what if you have house and car, and you can imagine wanting an image that has a single object that is somehow both a house and a car on a conceptual level, and not as in two separate objects? Do you think that's possible? Do you think that makes sense?
Yeah. I think definitely. I mean, this compositional operator, you can use it like in a nested way, and you can compose different like components, spatial and object attributes or objects categories in the way you want. Yeah.
That's easy. Thanks.
Go ahead.
Very closely related to Basil's comment. When you are breaking these down, you had two instances of these spatial relations. I don't remember the slide numbers, unfortunately, but there's one case where it was like you had something next to something else or something along those lines, and the next to was being used to determine how the composition was being put together of those two things. But then there's another place where the things being composed were, like, one example was a red house in front of a tree or something along those lines, and a something else, and a something else. So I was wondering how you use those spatial relations, or how you incorporate those or don't incorporate those in different pieces, and what role those end up playing. I think that's very related to what he was saying about this, like, different ways of composing things.
Yeah, I think the compositional operators, it allows you to do the compositionality in a controllable way. But there are only 3 compositional operators, which can be well defined in this framework, and, or, and not. And in many other compositionalities, for example, like a red house in the left, so this is also some compositionality, which cannot really be represented using these compositional operators. But I think, as I mentioned, like a powerful portrait model, like that can understand this simple concept is very important as well. So you can definitely train your model on top of this simple, like small, like like sentence descriptions that can help you understand the composition of certain concepts, which cannot be easily represented using the composition operators.
For the clever experiments, how did you put them on the other one? I think it was like,
oh, the object relational descriptions.
Yeah, exactly. How do you get it to do to the left of and in front of, or are those just the whole chunk and this one and the whole chunk after?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, the model is trained on generate image on each this like sentence, short sentence. Cool. So it can understand this composition. But in terms of more complicated compositions, we need the composition operators.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, just one quick question, also related to Basil's question. So the 3D diffusion model that you trained, was that trained with like rendering supervision or just on 3D occupancy? I'm curious because it's related to your question actually. I feel like if you would train on 2D, then you would get less, like you would get, I'm not sure if you agree with this, but like, I'm just curious, like what 3D diffusion model that was.
Sorry, can you repeat your question? I didn't get it.
Yeah, never mind. So I was just, the first question is just what 3D diffusion model was used for that 3D experiment?
Oh, 3D diffusion model, this one. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So we use this pre-trained 3D diffusion model. It's called the Point E from OpenAI. So we didn't, so there's a new, 3D data set. I think maybe people are already using the data set to train more powerful 3D models. And here we just use the existing 3D diffusion model.
Gotcha. So I'm curious that this thing that Basil was talking about, like spatial versus conceptual composition, if that is coming from the fact that the conceptual composition is sort of forced or implicit in the way that the 3D diffusion model is trained, because if the 3D diffusion, pardon me, sorry. Yeah, the 3D diffusion model, if it's being forced to like output in some occupancy space and the supervision is also on the occupancy space when you're doing this, then it makes sense that because your output only has like a certain number of area or like a box size grid, then you fuse concepts as part of your composition. But you can imagine if this 3D diffusion model like Dream Fusion was trained with like a rendering loss with like 2D images, then you're now allowed to like compose things spatially inside of these images and get like high affinity for each one or high energy. So I was wondering if there's like, if you think that the underlying inductive bias with which the 3D diffusion model is trained will impact the compositional structure.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm also thinking you can also use these compositional operators during your training to help you learn better 3D models. Yeah.
Quick question. I thought 20 was released very recently. How did you make it into ECCV 2022?
Sorry, I think there's some background noise. So sorry, can you repeat again?
I think 20 was released on December 2022, right? But
Oh, yeah.
how did you use it for your ECCV submission?
Oh.
Just curious.
Yeah, we just in our archive update, we just add this experiment. Yeah, it's the same paper, same idea.
So I have some other questions. So I'm just curious, does compositional operator sort of degrades the fidelity of the generated images in the the Stable Diffusion context? Is that happening, right? If you compose several concepts, does it make worse image than like less photorealistic image? And if so, why do you think that might be the case?
So your question is whether when we the image become worse if we compose more concepts?
Right, like the compositionality is correct, but the quality does it go worse?
I think based on our experiment, when you compose more concepts, it can generate better images. Yeah, that's our observation. So you can say this example like smiling, male, but after you compose more and more examples, so some image qualities becomes better. Yeah, so this at least it doesn't hurt.
That sounds like the exact reverse of Stable Diffusion. If you have like a very generic text prompt, it would generate very high fidelity image. I feel like that's very interesting. Yeah.
Shuang, I had a good question. Like I don't know if this is exactly related, but I was curious to know whether somehow you can also use compositionality to say what things you don't want to change about a certain image. So like, for example, you want like I guess this is more text to image generation models, but now I think through ControlNet, I think you also have a way of giving image or something else as like anything else as a conditional as a condition for generation, right? So in that case, it will be interesting to see if somehow you can use compositionality to also say, I want it to look like this, only I want this changed, but I don't want this other thing changed, and whether you can actually control that in the generation. And if so, how do you see this work fitting in?
Yeah, I think it can control this situation sometimes. And it really depends on what type of composition do you want. For example, here is like you want to generate chair, but not chair legs. It can give you such combination. But if you want to generate a cat without ear, it fails. So it really depends on like the distribution of the different concepts, whether there's some overlap between because this is. Think about the Gaussian distribution of different concepts, whether there's some overlap between each other. So this compositional operator is also, whether it works also depends on the representation of each concept.
Absolutely, yeah. And I feel like if it doesn't work, that might also give some insight into like what features are specifically important for what make an object a certain object or so on. Like some things maybe you just can't change because otherwise it wouldn't remain that object again. And it'll be interesting to see if those give insight into those representations basically, which define the objectness or the entity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think how a powerful prediction models is also very important. And also these composition operators can be used during training as well. So we have some work doing that, like the thing I mentioned in the future work. But yeah, it's a little bit different from the composition here. Yeah.
We have
just one last question, just a quick question. For the diffusion models that were conditioned, I was curious like how you were doing the conditioning for the diffusion models and whether like the different styles of conditioning you got different results there. Yeah.
So the different a different condition on the diffusion model, right? Sorry.
Right, so is this like, do you train like a condition diffusion model, or are you using classifier free guidance or something like that here?
Oh yeah, we are using the classifier free guidance here.
Okay.
So this is just implicit conditional noise term, and this is the implicit like unconditional noise term. We didn't use extra classifier, and this is just simply a classifier free guidance.
Gotcha, thank you.
Fine, I had a low-level question for you, which was, are you making an assumption that when you have two ands, that those are independent?
Yeah.
So I was curious how you have you seen failure modes where that assumption's not true, those two events are not independent, and if so, like how would you fix those?
Yeah, I think in theory we assume these concepts are independent, but really in the real experiment, we find that sometimes it's not necessary to be completely independent. And one reason maybe because we inject all this input into the high dimensional space. And because in the high dimensional space, the vectors are very likely to be orthogonal to each other. And in that case, like, in theory it is, but in practice it can be very flexible.
Right.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Any questions on Zoom? All right, so we can stop here. Thank you so much, Shuang. This was a fantastic talk. We really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks everyone, and talk to you later.
Yeah, so we'll start one-on-one